Hello, my name is Karl Smith, head of Access Technology, an assistive technology company in the state of Utah. I'm also second vice president of the National Federation of the Blind of Utah, and you're listening to White Canes Connect.
Hey there, PA Federationists. Welcome to another episode of White Canes Connect, presented by the National Federation of the Blind of Pennsylvania. My name is David Goldstein. I am the treasurer of the Keystone chapter. Joining me today, as always, is co-host and Keystone chapter second vice president, Lisa Bryant. Lisa, how are you today?
I am doing great, David, and it's convention time again. So we're starting our countdown to convention series, beginning with none other than our Madam President, Lynn Heitz, and this year's National Representative, Karl Smith.
It's going to be really interesting to hear Karl talk about everything that's going on nationally, and also maybe hearing him play the guitar on Friday night.
So let's listen.
Lynn and Karl, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you, David and Lisa. Thank you for having us.
It's that time again. State convention is coming up very shortly, and this is our kickoff episode. Lynn, Karl, nice to have both of you. Lynn is our state president, and Karl Smith is from Utah and is our national representative this year. So Karl, I guess we'll start with you. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and how did you come to the NFB?
I was born in Texas in 1955. I was the first one in my family to be born with cataracts, and that was back during the ancient times when they removed cataracts with a chainsaw and didn't have the technical expertise that we do now to remove cataracts. And they also didn't understand that you needed to do that early and put correction in, because I have since learned that if you don't learn how to focus or see properly as a child or as a very young infant, you never will. A doctor told me that if you blindfolded a normally sighted child for the first 3 months of life, they would never see normally because their eyes would never learn to properly focus. And so I didn't get my cataracts until I was about 6 months old, which was too late. As a result of the chainsaw surgeries, I developed secondary glaucoma and lived with that for a good long while during my growing up years and as an adult. The final loss of vision, I lost my vision back in 1989 as a result of a retina detachment, and they could not repair that. So I was low vision for most of my life, when I was younger, and then I'm now totally blind. I came to the Federation in an interesting way for me. It was in 1978. I, first of all, did not have anything to do with those blind people, because I was a low vision person, and I thought at the time that I was okay and I could do well enough and get by, and that I later have learned and really thought to myself that what I really thought was, I'm a pretty hotshot blind guy, but I'm a pretty lousy sighted person. So I thought I was sort of in the middle there, but I was at the top of the heap as a blind person. That's not what I think now, but that's what I thought then. And I came to Baltimore in 1978 in my first national convention, not for any reason except it was in Baltimore, and that was right near Washington, D.C. And I wanted to go see Washington, D.C., had always wanted to since I was a kid. And I thought, well, shoot, I can get cheap hotel rates. They were $14 a night then, by the way. And I could go to Washington, D.C., and see all the monuments and things and all the historic buildings and stuff. And I could let those blind people have their convention. Well, I came to the convention and was there for a couple of days, spent the first couple of days in the exhibit hall because it was so interesting to me and all the things I had never seen before. But as I did so, I began to meet people and began to see blind people doing things that I had always sort of thought about, but never quite really believed were possible. And I began to realize that I wasn't at the top of the heap as a blind person, and that I really was probably average or less than that. And the first time I walked into the convention hall, when the convention convened on the Tuesday morning at the time, there was a feeling I had never had before. There was an electric feeling in that room. And I just couldn't believe the feeling of all of those people together with all of this, working together to try and accomplish things. And I say I wanted to go to Washington, D.C., and I did, but I didn't go to the historic sites. I actually spent my afternoon protesting and against the FAA for removing our canes on airplanes. I didn't carry a cane at the time, but by cruddy, they weren't going to take my cane away if I did have one. So I remember marching up and down with a sign in front of the FAA building. And back then we had just 3 TV networks, ABC, CBS, and NBC. And I remember the cameras there, I could see those. And I remember thinking to myself, because growing up in the 1960s, I remember watching the Vietnam War protesters and other protesters. And I was kind of a arrogant little kid. And I used to think to myself, shoot the SOBs. Okay. And then I was marching around with this sign and seeing the cameras. And I was thinking, somewhere out there in middle America is somebody watching me saying, shoot the SOBs. And so that was my beginning in the Federation. I came home from there, started a chapter in my local area because we had an older chapter there that had been around for 100 years and was not really, an active Federation chapter exactly. Did those things that you do in chapter meetings and got people together, became the president of that chapter. A few years later, I became the state president, did that for many years. And so that's how I came to the Federation. And I have not left it since. I've been to every convention since then. So this was my 45th convention last year.
Wow.
And so I tell people, attend the national convention if you dare, because you might not, it might not result the way you thought it will, because you may end up attending 45 of them or more. And so that's my beginning story there. I don't know how far you want me to go, but
I actually did not know you started a chapter. So that is, we've got like living history here. So that's fantastic. That was a very powerful convention for you. I mean, it totally changed your perspective.
Oh, absolutely. It totally did, because I really just didn't understand what the Federation was about when I first came there. It was just all those blind people, and I have to tell you, one of the things that really affected me, over the years, of course, I was a chapter president, I was a state president, I came to national conventions, I came to Washington seminars, and did all of those things that most of us have probably done one time or another. And then came, well, two things. 1986, my family and I were at Disney World, and I began to notice strange things in my visual field. Like, gee, there's something over there sticking outside there on the right side there. I should go to the doctor when I get home and have him take a look at that. And we were standing actually just outside, I believe it was the Tiki Room. And we were going in, and all of a sudden, it really changed. And I suddenly couldn't see much of anything. And I said to my wife, maybe I should go to the doctor right now. And so we finished up the Tiki Room, came out. We had been visiting friends in Florida, so we went back to their place. It's interesting because I remember going out to wait for somebody to pick us up, and there were about a half a dozen Disney employees there with us. And they were asking me what happened, what's going on, and everything I said, they were all writing in their little notebooks. And I have since learned, because I had been working at what was then Sperry Univac, which is now Unisys, as a programmer, and we were the computer providers for Disney. And I found out since then that Disney settles something like $10,000 a day in lawsuits.
Wow.
And I'm sure that's what they were doing, was trying to make notes so that if I decided to sue them, I hit my head on Space Mountain or whatever, which didn't happen. So they wrote it down. I went off, I had a surgery, had to stay in Florida for 3 weeks or so because they put a gas bubble inside my eye to hold things together, and you couldn't fly as long as that thing was in there.
Mhm.
So they fixed that. That worked for a while. A couple of years later, 1988, it began to happen again. And here's where things really began to change a little bit for me. I had been a partially sighted, if you will, or low vision, whatever term you want,
Mhm.
blind person in the Federation, believing things, talking the talk, if you will. And I remember being in the hospital, and I was very aware that my vision probably was going to be gone. And I realized I need some training. It just came to me. I said, I've got to do something. So the first person I actually called was Diane McGeorge, because she was a friend of ours. She'd been to Utah several times, and I called her, took the bus because I couldn't fly, took the bus over to Colorado to see the Colorado Center, which happened to have just opened about maybe a year before. It was brand new at the time. Because I'm from the South, I said I was born in Texas, but most of my family now lives in Louisiana, at least on my father's side. And I decided, well, I should go and visit the Louisiana Center for the Blind, because I want to decide if I need to get some training, where I should go. And I did that, and stayed there for a few days, and came to the conclusion I needed some training. I needed to go and have intense training in blindness, because even though I talked the talk and I knew Braille, I had learned Braille as a child, because in the 1960s, it didn't psychologically damage you like it does now. And so, we could learn Braille and print at the same time, and you didn't have to have therapy afterwards. So I don't know why I did. They just said, here's Braille. When you're a kid in school, you say, okay, and you do it. And I'm very glad I did, because I'd never really used it a lot, but I knew it. And when I lost my vision, I was able to pick it up and continue. But the point is, once that happened to me, I began to realize that now I've been talking about this all these years, and I remember thinking to myself, I know these people that I've met over the years. So at that time, earlier President Jernigan, President Maurer, all the other people that have been around at conventions who were succeeding as blind people. And I remember thinking, if they can do it, so can I. Mm-hmm. And that was really a powerful feeling for me, to be able to understand that. And so when I went and got my training, I decided at the time, I did go to Louisiana, partly because I had never really lived in the South very long. I was born in Texas, but we moved to Las Vegas just a couple of years later. And so I lived in Las Vegas most of the time, and then ended up in Utah at the School for the Blind here. So I had never really lived in the South. So I thought, well, I'd like to do that. So I ended up doing that and spent about 10 months there, and got the training that I needed, and understood, and this is really what was the most important to me, I began to understand that it wasn't all just talk, that there was actually honesty and truth in the philosophy, and that even though I had talked it all those years, it's a lot different when you actually have to walk it. But I knew it could be done because I'd seen people do it. And that's part of the power of going to conventions and being part of an organization or a community, as we are, because you can see those things, you can understand that people can succeed. And it helped me to do that.
I'm glad you went into talking about the centers. Now, you also have worked at the center, is that correct?
Yes, I have a background in assistive technology now for the last 30 years. Probably in my banquet speech, I'll give you kind of a little more history about my working life, because it fits in with all of this. And but I finished up in late 1989 and went home, and I had been working, as I said, as a programmer at Unisys Corporation. Did that for 7 years. And when I lost my vision, I actually came back for a while. It's an interesting thing, because in February of 1989, it was about February the 2nd, let's say, we were filling out our annual insurance papers that you have to do, that says, next year I want this kind of insurance, and I want that, this and that.
The enrollment period.
And
or whatever.
For the first time, for some reason, something said to me, you ought to get long-term disability insurance. You never had. You ought to just go ahead and do it. So I did. I don't know why. I just did. I had never done it before. So I did. Well, on February 4th, is when I began to lose my vision.
Wow.
And so the fact is, of course, that didn't matter with the insurance because you had to be working during the fiscal year when it was in effect, which started in April. So in April, I came back. This is before I went to Louisiana. I came back and worked for several months there until you had to have a few weeks in the new fiscal year for things to take effect. And my manager let me come back and help train people in what I had been doing because I knew I was going to be going to Louisiana by then. And fortunately, I was able to get that long-term disability, which I had never signed up before. And I was able to use that while I went to Louisiana. And then also afterwards, because it had payments for quite a number of years, it could do that. But afterwards, I went home, and Joanne Wilson, who was director at the time then, called and asked me, well, two things. They wanted to know if I could run the STEP program. That is a program for blind teenagers. And I said, you got to be kidding. What do I know about, teenagers? And she said, well, I think you'd be good at it. So we want to start a program. They hadn't started one yet. We'd like you to come out here and run it. And she said, can you come ahead of time so that we can get all the paperwork and all the logistics set up for it? So I came back in May of 1990, and they had me teaching computer classes for a while at the time. And I'm a terrible teacher. I love computers. I love gadgets. But, if I tell somebody to hit F7 for the 14th time in a row, I'm ready to hit them with a stick or something, So I have a really difficult time. Ask my wife. I don't teach her how to use computers. I don't dare. But I came and did that, and then I ran the STEP program, and I actually did that 3 summers in a row. I started the first STEP program they had, and then 91 and 92, I did that. And so that's when I worked there. And then after that, some years later, I don't remember what year, I've been trying to remember this, but I can't remember. It was in the mid 90s sometime. Joanne called and asked me if I would like to be a member of the board of directors. And actually it was Tom Lai who called me. Tom Lai was chairman then. Called me and said they had considered me as a member of the board of directors and would I like to do that. And I did. And so I became a member of the Louisiana Center board of directors in the mid 90s. And when Joanne was still director, and then I've been there ever since, and I was the vice chairman for a good while. And then Tom Lai passed away a few years back, and they elected me chairman, or president, I guess is what we call it. Mm-hmm. And that's what I've been doing. So I've had a long-term relationship with the center. Yeah. And with training and with all the things that go with that.
I was doing a little digging and researching on you, and I saw a couple of articles that you wrote for the Monitor, and I want to come back to one of them where you talk about structured discovery, and just kind of going into a little more detail about that. But before we even go to that, I want to go back to STEP. Was that an acronym?
Summer Training Employment Project, or Summer Training and Employment Project is what it meant.
Now, you said you were working at Unisys, but that's not where you are now. So tell us about your career now. You are an entrepreneur. Tell us about your business and okay. How did you get, from A to B?
Well, that's an interesting story too, and it fits in again with my federation activity. The federation has been in my life one of the greatest things which has helped me through triumph and tragedy in my life. And when I was after the STEP program was over, 1992, I don't know how many of you remember the Braille and Speak. That was a great little piece of equipment that I had and had started with. And I happened to know and happened to have met Dean Blasey over the years. And he used to come once a year to Utah and other places, but he would come out to Utah and he would train teachers on the Braille and Speak. He would bring out a pile of Braille and Speaks and he would do a class, a day-long or 2-day-long class. And then he would go skiing because that's what Dean likes to do. And that way he could write the trip off on his taxes. And so I called him at the end of 1992 and I was going to schedule his next trip. And he said, man, I am just too busy. I just can't do it. I sure wish I had some more trainers. And I said, well, how about me? He said, are you available? I said, yeah, sure. He said, well, interesting thing he said was, are you able to travel? Oh, that's right. You're an NFB. So he knew that already. But he had understood that, yeah, I should be able to. So he sent me to Las Vegas to a conference sat at the table, passed out catalogs, talked about things. I began to do that, travel around for him at least once a month, maybe twice a month, all over the country, teaching classes, handing out catalogs at shows, you name it, I did it. And one of the things that happened to me at the shows, especially, is I began to see the same people. You go, you set up your table, and lo and behold, there's somebody from Enabling Technology, and there's the guy from Hinder Joyce, and there's the guy from, wherever. And it was all the same people dragging their equipment out, setting it up, dragging it away at the end of the show. And I knew, of course, there was nobody in Utah selling the products. They used to buy them out of Colorado or somewhere else. And I thought, well, shoot, why don't I do some of that? So I began to inquire about it, first with Dean, picking up the Braille and Speak and Type and Speak and other products like that, began to sell those. And then I met Ted Hinter and spent time with him, picked up JAWS for Windows and those things, and then just worked my way into other products. At this time, I was selling all basically blindness, that is speech and Braille products. And then in 1994, the man that was in Utah who used to do telesensory low vision products was thrown from a horse and hit his head on a rock and never recovered. I mean, he didn't die, but his brain damage was severe enough that he never really could do the work anymore. And they came and asked me if I would be interested in taking on the low vision products, which is a larger market than total blind products because there's a lot more low vision people out there. And I did. And that's really when things began to pick up. And so I just, worked that, and lo and behold, here it is, almost 30 years later, I'm still doing it.
Wow. And that company is?
My company is called Axis, AXIS. And like I said, I deal in all the different products. I've been, all over the country dealing with those, and I've sold a lot of them. I do training, all that sort of stuff I've done for just a number of years.
Tell us about being a business owner. I think some of the challenges are universal, whether you're sighted or not. But what have been some of the, I guess, maybe success stories and challenges in all the years? How long have you done the business?
Well, like I said, it started sort of slowly with the work with Dean, and I did the travel like that. That was mostly just traveling for him every month. And as I began to pick up products, and especially when I picked up the low vision products, the telesensory at the time, required you to have at least one of everything they had. Well, at that time, I remember very nervously signing a nearly $10,000 note to buy all these CCTVs I couldn't use. But I had to have them to show. But I knew that people could use them because I had used CCTVs when I was low vision. So that was the first thing, was to do that and to take upon myself that responsibility without really knowing what was going to happen. The next thing, of course, is if you're totally blind like I am, or you can't drive, is how do you get around with these things? And I had hired a couple of people different ways for drivers. I had a few, temporary drivers, part-time drivers and things. I have taken a number of CCTVs on the bus. I mean, I have, when I went to Southern Utah one time, I loaded up about 5 or 6 of them in the luggage compartment of the bus, rode down there and hauled them off of the bus. And there was a little shed there. You could put things in, put them in there. One of my favorite stories, I don't know if you saw this article or not, but this had to do with, I went down there. I forget how I found this gentleman, but I found a guy who said he would drive me around when I was in St. George. And so I agreed to hire him to do that. I, took this equipment down on the bus, hauled it in, took it to the hotel, stacked them up in my room, called him up, and he said, "Oh man, I can't do it. My van's not working and something else happened, so I can't drive for you."
Oh my God.
Well, I had appointments and things to do. And so I got thinking, what do you do? What does a person do now when you have no transportation? Well, I called the front desk. I said, do you have anybody that who could do this? Well, they didn't. I called the taxi company. They didn't have anybody. I was trying to think, what am I going to do? And then I talked to the lady at the front desk again, and she said, I have a relative, I can't remember now if it was an uncle or something, who's around here, who's going to be here for a while, and he's nothing to do. Maybe he could do it. So she gave me his number. I called him up. Lo and behold, he had an old ratty pickup truck, and with no odometer on it or anything like that, because I was going to pay by the mile.
Yeah.
but he didn't have any way to measure that. But he came out, picked me up, and we just sort of guesstimated the miles. I rode around, visited who I had come to visit, sold some equipment, and paid the man what he and I agreed to pay, that he was worth to do the work. And I went back home again. So, that was just a problem solving. That's a part of, I guess you'd call structured discovery that maybe isn't emphasized a lot, but sometimes you just have to think of ways. And what was I going to do? I mean, I had come down there, I'd spent the money to take the bus down there. I had the hotel. What was I going to do? I had people who wanted to see this, and that's how I had to make my living. So I was able to do that. So, but since then I've hired, I have a driver now who's worked for me for 21 years. It turns out it's my brother-in-law. His wife and my wife are sisters. And so we always say we're always in trouble. But he works part-time for UPS in the morning and then part-time for me in the rest of the day. And I have since, been able to buy a vehicle. I have a van now. I can take things in and such. I've had a couple of vans actually. And so, it's just grown out of that. And so that's kind of the way it's been going for the last 30 years. I suspect I may be coming somewhat to the end of it. I've been here a long time. The markets are changing, the system, the companies are changing the way they do business. It's not as dealer friendly as it once was.
Yeah.
And but I don't know. I mean, there's no official report on that, but I've really enjoyed it. It's something I felt good about. It's one of the things I really like about it is I'm able to do things that will help people. If you give somebody the ability to use a screen reader and get work done in a job or in school or something, or a note-taking device or a video magnifier or whatever, there's older people, especially that maybe in their 80s or so, and they're losing vision, and maybe they live alone now, and they're worried about having to move to some senior facility, a retirement center, or assisted living, because they can't read their mail or can't read their prescription bottles or whatever. And I know this sounds like a sales pitch, but I sometimes tell them, look, I realize these machines aren't cheap. I won't say they are, but if you spend $3,000 on a CCTV and it allows you to stay home in your home for another couple of years or more, reading the things you need to, it's a bargain when it comes to going to a senior assisted living, because those are thousands of dollars a month. And so, it's a real great feeling to be able to help people like that.
I know a lot of people are probably sitting around, a lot of the younger folks who are listening to this thinking, why didn't you just call Uber when you were down in St. George and just have them pick you up? It's just so much different today. And I don't think a lot of folks get that. You're talking about thousands of dollars for these pieces of equipment. Are there ways that folks can buy them outside of, here's my credit card, here's a check? How does that, especially if you're maybe a moderate income or you are out on disability, how does someone afford something like that? Are there ways that do you work with the different OVR type places from state to state, or in Utah, let's say? How does that work?
In my territory, which is basically Utah and Idaho for the low vision products, there are programs through assistive technology grants. And in fact, every state has an assistive technology program. They're called different things, and they manage them differently. But our state has a couple of things you can do. You can get grants for, I think it may be up to $1,000 now, and that's something you don't have to pay back. You just get the grant. You can apply it toward the purchase of assistive technology. If you need more than that, they also have low interest long-term loans that are very low interest, and the payments can be put out to where the monthly payment is pretty small. That's one way. There are private organizations. The Utah Council of the Blind actually has a grant program too. They'll do that. They don't do loans, but they do grants. I've had people get those and use them. There are, of course you can do bank loans, things, that's the regular things, but there are many ways to do it. And I don't really sell things on time very much because I'm not big enough of a company to be able to afford that. However, I will sell a product, say, and have you pay it off in, say, 3 payments, maybe, or 4 maybe at the most, because I don't want to take it away on a monthly basis, because I can't afford to maintain inventory and pay for it that small, because I've got to pay for them up front. I don't get a deal like that. but most states have some program like that. And then there are, of course, there's vocational rehabilitation. I've had some people use assistance from Lions clubs and other organizations. So there are ways to do it.
Okay. And Lisa, I guess the organization that you sit on the board of is
Yeah,
something along that
I'm
line.
on the board of the Pennsylvania Assistive Technology Foundation, which is our version of what you just spoke about. We wanted to have you on because you are this year's national rep. I guess, Lynn, why don't we bring you in here to talk about the convention flow, where Karl will be coming in, and then Karl will turn it back to you, and you can give us maybe a little sneak peek at how you're going to address the attendees.
Lisa, thank you so much. And Karl, thank you so much for sharing with us tonight. So the convention agenda is actually out for what I call eye candy for the large print version. We finally got it done. So we are starting on Thursday this year, November the 10th, and we're starting at 9:30 in the morning with a Senior Possibilities Fair. Group of people have been working with seniors on a monthly basis through Zoom and asked me if they could attach a Senior Possibilities Fair to state convention. And I said, sure, why not? And then had to figure out when to do it. So we're doing it from 9:30 to noon on Thursday. And then from 1 to 5 is our technology seminar. We will have our exhibit hall open on Thursday as well, from 11 to 5. And then Thursday evening, starting at 7, we're going to have our celebration of veterans because, of course, Friday is Veterans Day. And we started this last year, and it was really a phenomenal event. Our second vice president, Emily Gillisberger, organizes this, and she does a really dynamic job. We have some members of the board of the National Association of Blind Veterans coming again this year to help us. So it's a very, very awesome event. Friday, just all day Friday is like busy from 8 a.m. till whenever it happens to end on Friday night, which I put a question mark in the agenda because it could go till whenever. So we're starting at like 8 o'clock in the morning with our student division and our blind parents group. They're both starting at 8. And at 9:30, our parents of blind children will be meeting. Concurrently with those meetings will be the guide dog division and the deaf blind division. In the afternoon, of course, our blind veterans, our Jigsaw chapter, which is our at-large chapter, piecing Pennsylvania together, will be meeting for their annual meeting. We also have a young blind woman who is certified in teaching chair yoga. And she's going to be doing a chair yoga session. She is from the Bureau of Vocational Rehabilitation Services of Pittsburgh. And we also have a very, very special event. We've been in contact with a couple of professors that do tactile astronomy. And also with Dan Gardner, who is the gentleman who runs View Plus Technologies. So he does a lot of tactile embossing with the Tiger Embosser. So we're doing that on Friday afternoon, and that should be really, really exciting. I'm very excited about that. We will then have our board meeting, our state board meeting, our resolutions committee meeting, and starting at 7 o'clock on Friday evening, we are having our talent show. Well, it's not really a talent show. It's more like an open mic slash silent auction. And we have some really awesome talent. And I understand that Karl plays the guitar, and maybe we talk him into bringing his guitar. So that should be really, really exciting. Saturday is our general session. We have several people on the agenda from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and I'm very, very excited about that. I don't want to get too much into that because I don't want to blow it, but it will be very riveting, to say the least. We also have the chief of staff for Representative George Dunbar's office. He's a state representative who is willing to champion our commission legislation in Pennsylvania. And then, of course, Saturday night will be our banquet, and Karl will be giving our keynote at the banquet, and we have a live band at after the banquet for dancing and what have you. And then, of course, Sunday morning is our business meeting. So it's a really, really full weekend, and I'm very excited. I mean, I almost think we could have added another day to the convention, because people kept saying, well, can this person come and present? And can this person come and present? And, it's really great to have all this different talent that does want to come on board and participate. And, you have to pick and choose. So, and we just hope that, they'll ask next year when there's before the agenda really gets fixed.
Can we go back to Friday for a second? Blind merchants are going to be in there somewhere. Do you know?
Yes.
Morning, afternoon?
Yes, they're in the afternoon.
Okay.
1:00, as a matter of fact, because I was looking that up for somebody else.
Okay.
Yes, it's 1:00 on Friday afternoon.
And last year during the talent show, open mic, whatever you want to call it, and auction, there was food, which I actually didn't know was going to be there. It's going to be something similar this year where there'll be a little bit finger food type of stuff.
We will have some finger food. We'll also have a cash bar. We will also have finger food and a cash bar on Thursday evening as well.
So can people still sign up for the talent show, Lynn?
Absolutely.
So Karl, you bring in your guitar?
Actually, I'm going to have to borrow somebody's, because I play the 12-string, and it's just really hard to carry it on an airplane. So if somebody has a guitar, I'd be glad to play it. I'd love to bring it. I wish I could.
Yeah.
But it's just, I used to sometimes bring it with me and, say, well, would you put this in the closet? Well, some planes don't have closets, and sometimes they won't do it anymore. So I'm never sure whether I should do that or not.
I actually know somebody who has a 12-string who is learning how to play it. And he's actually the gentleman who is the brainchild behind Accessible Pharmacy Services for the Blind, Alex Cohen.
Yeah.
So I can call Alex and say, hey, can you bring your 12-string, and see what he says.
That'd be great. Like I said, it doesn't have to be a 12-string. I just like the sound of 12 strings. And if you could bring one, I'd love that. If not, if somebody has anything else I could borrow, I'd be happy to do a song or two. Whatever happens, I don't want to do anything that, that takes away from whatever other people are going to do. But I did some of that. We didn't have a talent show, but I was at Kansas convention last year, and Tom, the president there, just happened to have a couple of really nice guitars. We sat down before the banquet and played together, and it was really fun. And so I would enjoy doing that if there's an opportunity for me to. Is it something you're supposed to sign up for? Because I didn't see it on the registration thing. So
no. What I can do is one of our members, a couple of our members are actually in charge of it. And I actually did mention to them that you played guitar, and they're like, oh, really? Can he be part of the talent show? And I'm like, I think we can figure that out. And, Karl, it would be great if we can get this to work out, because it's really wonderful whenever the national rep really becomes a part of the convention.
Yeah.
I mean, I know you have certain pieces that you do as President Riccobono's representative here, but you know, we like to have a lot of fun in Pennsylvania. So let's see how we can work this out.
That'd be great. And I would just like to say, you know, I have only done this a couple of times now because that's something I always wanted to do, and President Riccobono's given me the opportunity to do it. But one of the things that's interesting, my friend Everett Bacon, I talked to him when I did this last year, and I said, you know, when you come in as national rep, for some reason they think you know everything because you know, you must, you're coming, you know, but the president sent you. No, I'm just a guy. I mean, I'm just a blind guy who happens to have been in the Federation a while. I know some things maybe that you don't know, but I mean, I certainly don't know everything and don't profess to. My goal is to do the things that I'm supposed to do to present the information to you guys that President Riccobono would like. But I am there at your, you know, at your service. So if there's something I can do for you, whether it's in the talent show or meeting people or whatever, I'm happy to do that because I want to have a good time too. And I don't want anybody to think that, you know, I'm there for some, you know, I'm some elite sort of person. I'm not. I'm just a guy. So I'm happy to be there and help you out if I can.
Absolutely. We're like very much a family.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Karl, because that was also something I wanted to talk about, how representatives are assigned or picked or whatever the terminology is. Can you give us any insight on how that happens? How were you chosen, for instance, to be our representative?
Well, first of all, I don't have a lot of answers on that, but there is a specific answer in my case. I've always, you know, I've been a member of the Federation a long time, been to lots of conventions, been to a lot of different state conventions in different states, of course, 45 national conventions. So I thought, you know, one thing I've never got to do is be a national rep. And it used to be that it was always board members, national board members who did that. But over the years, there have been other people who have done it. And I thought, well, you know, what the heck? And so I happen to know Everett Bacon, who's our president. He's a member of the board. I went and said, hey, Everett, how do I get on that list? And he said, talk to President Riccobono. I said, okay, well, I know Pam Allen. She's like, hey, Pam, how do I do that? Talk to President Riccobono. Everly Harrison, I know her. I said, Everly, how do I talk to President Riccobono? Well, I said, well, this seems to be a common theme here. So a few years back, he was up in Idaho at the convention, and I go to the Idaho convention to show equipment. And I went to breakfast with him, and I said, you know, one thing I've always wanted to do is be a national rep at a convention. I said, I think I could do that. And his answer was, okay. Thank you. I got it. I heard you. And I thought that was the end of it. I said, you know, I did my bit. I put my word in. I didn't know what he thought or didn't think. Well, then last year, I happened to be in Louisiana at the first part of November. I had a cousin who passed away from COVID, and we went down for her memorial. And when I got home on like November the, I don't know, 5th or 6th or something, there was an email from President Riccobono. Could you go to kansas this weekend?
That weekend.
That
oh my
weekend.
Goodness.
And I call him. Well, it turns out that Kevin Worley was supposed to go, but he had COVID. So President Riccobono called up and said, yeah, can you go? I said, well, is it Zoom or in person? He goes, well, I really want to be in person. I said, well, so do I, because I'm tired of these Zoom meetings. So I went to Kansas and did that. That was how I was chosen for that. How I was chosen for your convention, I don't know. I mean, nobody seems to know the procedure. All they know is that sometimes they get called up and asked to go places. And this time of year, of course, is busy convention season. So, you know, a lot of people are all over different conventions. There are usually a number of conventions happening, you know, on the same weekend. So that's how I got chosen to go to the first one. It's how I got chosen to go to this one. And I'm just really excited, especially because I'm so excited to be together with people again. I think the in-person part of it has been really, you know, really missed by me, certainly. And I'm really excited that we can do it that way. And one of the things that I want to emphasize in my presentations anywhere is that, you know, one of the things that I learned as I said, when I went to that first national convention, and especially when I came into the main, you know, convention session the first morning, I didn't understand it exactly then, but over the years, I've figured out that, you know, this organization is not a bunch of blind people exactly. It is a number of individual blind people. And you can't get anything done if you think about us as a great group of collectiveness, if you will.
Yeah.
We are all individuals. We all have different talents. We have different things we bring to the table. And I think it's so important for us all to work together and be that treat each other as individuals who have worth and have something to bring to the Federation and to what we're doing. And that is something which I think the agencies never understood about what the Federation was, why we got started, and why we have been so successful. They never understood that one blind person helping another blind person thing that we do. And I will be giving some examples and things of that in my banquet speech as well.
I think people will come away with very encouraged from hearing your story.
Mhm. We actually never stopped having in-person conventions. When everything shut down in March of 2020, it was, I just can't say the trauma that was felt, because we all missed that personal touch of getting together. So even in the fall of 2020, we actually we were the only affiliate, as a matter of fact, that had an in-person component to their state convention. And we did, we had hybrid, but we had like 36 people together at this hotel. And it was really awesome. The hotel, the catering portion of the hotel was closed down. So we had to hire an outside caterer to bring food in. But we were also able to bring our own Keurig coffee makers and different snacks in, which of course this year we can't do that because the catering service is open at the hotel. So you can't bring your own stuff in. But last year, we decided that we would not do a hybrid component. And the convention was very well attended. And we have 90 plus people registered this year so far. So we really feel the need to be together. And we were very fortunate that none of the 36 people that attended in person in 2020 came home and got COVID. So we were very blessed that way, and we were very blessed to be able to be together. So
if somebody wants to go now, somebody is listening to this and we're a couple weeks out, is there a way for them to still go with the hotel situation? Why don't you talk about that a little bit?
So it just so happens that there is a Pittsburgh Steelers and Saints are playing football at home in Pittsburgh on Sunday, November 13th. It also happens that there are 3 weddings in the hotel that weekend. So we are like over 20 rooms over our contracted amount of rooms. The hotel has kind of cut us off at this point. So there's a few individuals that have rooms by themselves. And so if somebody really, really, really wants to go, what they need to do is they need to contact our convention chair, Joe Drenth, and you can reach him at joe.drenth, which is spelled DRENTH @gmail.com. Reach out to Joe and let him know, and we'll take a look at the rooming situation and see if there's somebody that might be willing to share the cost of a hotel room. Other than that, there is a Hyatt House hotel that's relatively close. And there are some rooms at the hotel, but we are no longer able to offer the convention rate. So I believe the rooms are up to about $200 a night.
Well, folks, if you haven't already, you just heard what you might be looking at in terms of cost. So hopefully people can, if they can't get a hotel, they can, join us virtually, but you will miss out on so much, as Lynn just described, on Thursday and Friday. So that's unfortunate, but you will hear Karl's, what I'm sure will be a very encouraging and inspiring speech that he'll give us. But Karl, I wonder if you, at any point in either in conversations or in your formal speech, will talk about the importance of our centers, and the training they provide, and the philosophy around the center. I mentioned earlier that structured discovery. There are quite a few divisions that would be interested or probably already even know about that. But for those outside of that world, can you talk a little bit about structured discovery and why that is the philosophy of the centers?
Certainly. One of the things that I have seen over the years, and maybe you have seen this as well, at certain agencies for the blind, you'll see somebody and they'll say, well, yeah, I was here a couple of years ago, but I came back because I needed to have the travel teacher help me learn my new apartment complex. Or I needed to have the travel teacher help me learn the university campus.
Mm-hmm.
If you've heard that sort of thing, that to me triggers a thought that these people aren't using structured discovery. But structured discovery is a fancy way of saying, get out there and try it, because there are things that you learn at the centers, and this is why what sets us apart, I believe, is that we do emphasize structured discovery, which really teaches you how to use a cane, for example. That's where it's thought of mostly, as in structured discovery, using a cane to travel, learning how to pay attention to traffic and all the things that you're used to, but also learning how to learn about new areas and so forth. I'll tell you a little story about this, because this comes up occasionally. People will say to me, well, you got help over there, so why did you do that? That doesn't show me that you're doing much structured discovery. Well, it all depends. There are two things that happened. I used to fly back and forth from Louisiana to Utah when I was a student there. I did it a few times, and I would transfer in Dallas. And the Dallas airport has, at least the airline I was on, there's a big long concourse, and generally my luck is my flight would come in on gate A1 and the flight going out was on Z30 or something like that. It was way out there. So I came through one time heading back to Louisiana, and I had with me a guitar, a Braille book, a chocolate suicide cake, and a cane. And I got off the plane, and I had about 10 minutes between my flight that I just got off of and the one I had to get on. The lady said, take my arm, and I said, let's go. And we tore down the concourse, got there to that next gate. I clambered onto the airplane just in time to take off and get to Monroe. Well, the next time I did that, I landed again at like A1, and my flight was leaving at Z30, but I had 2 hours. So I said, no, I don't need any help now. I'm just going to walk down here. And one thing that I did, as I walked down the concourse, I was paying attention, listening. Oh, there is an ATM machine somebody just used. There's somebody getting a drink from a fountain. There sounds like a restaurant. You pay attention to those things as you travel. Now, I also noticed there were people following me, and I could hear the radio. Yes, he's going past the Bank of America, because they were tracking me. They didn't want me to get lost, right? I knew that was happening. But people will say to me, well, my question to you is, which of those was the correct way to do it? And I maintained that both of them were correct, because it would have been stupid of me to try and do that with 10 minutes to go. But when I had 2 hours, I did it. And it wasn't to prove things. People say, well, you wanted to prove something. No, what I wanted to do was practice my skills. And as you walk and pay attention by yourself, you notice those things. Like I said, escalators, and you hear, you can actually track somebody by listening to their suitcase, wheels going along. Sometimes you can do lots of things that you wouldn't do when walking with somebody else. And that's part of the discovery part, are learning those kinds of techniques and learning how to go to a new environment and to find your way through. You may have to ask questions, you may discover different things, but if you do that, you learn it better. Here's another thing that I also know about it, and that is that you really have to keep your skills up. After I graduated from the center, I was home a few years, and I did the things that we've talked about with Dean Blasey and that. But there was an event coming up in Salt Lake City. I don't know how many of you know who Richard Paul Evans is, but he wrote the Christmas Box and a bunch of other things. He was putting on a seminar that was for people who like to write and were interested in things. And there were two things I wanted to see. One of them was Harry Turtledove, who is a science fiction writer who I like a lot of his books. He was going to be there. I thought that'd be great to get to see him. And they also had Henry Winkler there. He was one of the keynote speakers, and I really wanted to go. And I kept asking around, and nobody wanted to go with me. And I was sort of moping around. My wife finally said, "Why don't you just go?" And I thought, yeah, I guess I probably should. But I was a little nervous, because if you don't keep this up, you don't keep it up. You don't keep the skills up. So I took a taxi downtown, got there, and guess what? Besides Richard Paul Evans's event, there was a medical convention going on in the middle of that great big arena place. So I made my way through that, finally found where the Evans event was, got registered, ended up meeting Richard's brother, David, and got to the classes I wanted to, met Harry Turtledove, met Henry Winkler. I mean, it was a great experience, and I would not have done it, A, if I hadn't had structured discovery training in the first place, B, if my wife hadn't given me a kick in the rear and said, "Look, I thought you went and got training for this." And she was right. But if you don't do those kind of things and keep your skills up, it doesn't mean, I don't want people to think it means, well, I'm going to prove what a great blind person I am. It has nothing to do with that. It really has to do with making sure that that you're capable of solving problems and getting where you want to go when you want to go. There was another article you may have seen that I had in the Monitor called about Elvis. Elvis was a penguin, and we were down in New Zealand, and at it's the South Pole Science Center. I forget the title of it exactly now, but it's where you go if you're going to go to the South Pole. It's about the last civilized place you go before you fly to the South Pole. And they had an exhibit there with penguins, and these were called second chance penguins. They were penguins who had been injured either by boats, humans, or other animals or whatever, and they would never have survived in the wild on their own. And so the lady there was talking about it, and she took out the bucket with a fish in it, and she said, when they hear this, they'll come and get their fish. And she said there was Elvis, who happens to be blind. He was blinded by a boat prop, I think it was, and she said he knows how to find these things. Well, he didn't come out of his little burrow. And someone said, "Well, aren't you going to go take him some fish?" And she said, "No." She said, "If I do that, he'll never come out." Says he needs to learn how to do that himself. I thought, boy, here's a person who knows about structured discovery, who doesn't have a clue that she's doing it that way. But I thought, I wish that many of our trainers in the blindness field understood it as well as she did. But she knew Elvis needed to get out there on his own, and he finally did. And so, that's really the key to what I think of as structured discovery. And also, it doesn't just pertain to cane travel; it pertains to cooking, working in the kitchen. How do you? I've seen students terrified to get their baked cookies out of the oven and let them burn because they were too afraid to reach in there and get them out. You have to learn how to do that. When I teach computers, one of the things I try to do is teach people. I don't want to teach you what keystrokes to press for everything, because they'll change and you'll forget. And if you type the wrong one and the wrong order, then you won't know how to get out of it. I try to teach people the structure of Windows and the structure of the different things that are there, so you understand what a dialog box is and what does it mean when there's a list box and what are things you can do, because I'm not going to be there to get you out of that trouble every time. You can't just sit there and wish it would go away. So structured discovery really can be used in everything.
Well, Karl, Lynn, thank you so much for taking some time out to talk with us and get us in our convention countdown mode. We appreciate having you.
Well, I appreciate being here, and I'm really excited to be at your convention, and I hope I can bring something to contribute to it. I always enjoy meeting people from around the Federation. That was one of the things that excited me when I first got involved was, gee, I've got friends all over the country all of a sudden. How did that happen? So I'm really excited about that. I know I looked up the folks from Kansas when I was at the national convention last year, and we reminisced a bit about their convention. That was their first in-person convention for a while. So you guys stuck it out. Good for you. But I'm excited to be there. And if there's anything that I can do before, if you want to contact me, if there's some question you have or something you'd like me to participate in or not participate in or whatever, again, I'm there at your service. And so I'm happy to do whatever you want, and I'm not there to try to tell you what to do or anything like that. I'm there to learn as much as you are and to provide what I can best provide. I
so look forward to Karl being our national rep and meeting him for the first time. And I just want to, thank again Lisa and David for having us on. It's always a great opportunity to be on this podcast, and I'm so glad that you guys started this up.
Thank you, Lisa and David and Lynn. I'm looking forward to meeting all you folks too.
Thanks again to Lynn and Karl for coming on. And Lisa, it's getting exciting to get ready for the convention again this year. I'm looking forward to going to Pittsburgh. I know you're going to be there. I'm going to be there. I know there's going to be at least one meal eaten at Primanti Brothers, which I have been dying to go to probably since they announced the 2020 convention in Pittsburgh, but I am looking forward to it. How about you?
I really am. And I hope there are quite a few people, more than not, that were able to get a hotel in time so that you could be there in person. I've never been to Pittsburgh. I'm looking forward to that. And looking forward to meeting Karl. I think he was very clear that he wants to meet us all. He wants to engage with us. So if you are going, definitely approach him, talk to him about the center, talk to him about being a business owner, talk to him about education, talk to him about playing the guitar, whatever, he's really availed himself, which is nice.
Right. And that's, as we're talking, I thought, boy, here's a couple of questions I have about doing the training centers and how that all goes down. Obviously, being a business owner myself, talking business, talking about assistive technology that I'm sure he's so versed in over the years with seeing basically coming off the stone tablets into what we get now. I'm really looking forward to connecting with Karl in Pittsburgh. And again, if you're going to Pittsburgh, approach us too. Come up and say hi. Give us your tips, story ideas. And if you're already in Pittsburgh and you're going to be going to the convention each night, you're not going to be staying in a hotel, and maybe you have a spare bedroom, maybe you can make a couple of bucks and connect with somebody who still needs a place to stay and who would still like to go to the convention, but just can't get that hotel room.
So folks, if you have other ideas that you're not going to be at the convention, you want to reach out to us, feel free to use that email account, whitecanesconnect@gmail.com. We love your feedback as well.
Yeah, anything you've got, please reach out via email or the phone number 267-338-4495. You've got up to 3 minutes. Leave your name and town. You don't have to be a member of the NFB to call us. Please give us a call. Give us your feedback, tips, show ideas, whatever you've got. One thing that I think would be really great, if you do something around your house or when you're out and about and you think it might help even one other blind person, let us hear it and we'll let everybody else hear it. And maybe it'll help somebody in the long run. Again, 267-338-4495. We'd love to hear from you, and we'll play it on an upcoming episode.
Otherwise, we'll see you in Pittsburgh.
Thanks for listening. Take care.